Have you ever heard of a grave that refuses to accept a corpse? One that will not keep a dead body within it? Today, I will tell the story of a cursed graveyard in Shalingar, Narayal. A terrifying scene was discovered the morning after a burial. The grave looked as if someone had carefully dug it up, and the body, still wrapped in its burial shroud, was placed outside without a single scratch. It was as if someone had lifted the body from the grave in the dead of night and laid it out. Fearfully, the villagers buried the body once more. But at dawn the next day, the same scene awaited them. The grave was open, the body outside. A chilling wave of terror swept through everyone. A few days later, another body was buried, and brave young men were assigned to guard it. But what happens that night was beyond human imagination. In the morning, the guards were found beside the grave, deep in an unbreakable, death-like sleep. And right before them, the dreadful deed had been done again. The grave was dug up, the body lay outside. Upon waking, the guards said they remembered nothing but an otherworldly sweet fragrance. What was this force that could overpower even the guards? What was that unearthly scent that pulled people into a deathly slumber? And why? Why were the bodies being lifted from their graves and placed outside? What exactly happened in that graveyard in the dark of night? Let's find out that bone-chilling truth. I hope you are all well and healthy. Dear listeners, many of you have asked for stories related to graveyards. This time, I've brought you a strange incident involving a graveyard. I hope you all enjoy it. The person who shared the story is named Ibrahim, a resident of Shalnagar Union in the Narail district. The story was collected from Ibrahim by Alamin. So, dear listeners, without further ado, let's get straight into the story. The events took place sometime between 1980 and 1990. In that village, there were two influential brothers who were very good people. God had blessed them with great wealth and property, which they used to benefit the community by building schools, colleges, and roads. Near their house was a mosque. The central graveyard for Shalnagar Union was quite far away, making it difficult for people in the vicinity to bury their dead. Because of this, the two brothers decided to create a graveyard on a piece of land they owned right next to the mosque. The land had a large bamboo grove and several large old kadam trees. The villagers took the bamboo for free, and a timber merchant named Ruhul Amin bought the kadam trees. Shortly after they planned the graveyard, the brothers' mother had a dream in which someone was telling her not to build the graveyard there. But when she told her sons about the dream, they didn't take it seriously. Meanwhile, one night before cutting the kadam trees, Ruhul Amin also had a dream. Someone said to him, "Ruhul, don't cut the trees or you will suffer a great loss." But Ruhul also ignored the dream. He cut down the trees himself, putting in a lot of effort, and took the logs to a sawmill. The graveyard was prepared and a sign reading "Graveyard" was hung outside. A few days later, a man named Kalu was buried at night after his funeral prayer. The strange events began the very next morning. The next morning, after the Fajr, dawn prayer, something white was seen near the graveyard. The first to notice it were those who stayed in the mosque for a while after prayers and left as the sun began to rise. They walked closer. They saw that the grave where Kalu had been buried the previous night was dug up, and Kalu's body was placed very carefully outside it. Some of the people present wondered who could have done this, maybe a jackal? But then they argued against their own theory, saying, if a jackal had dug up the body, there would be scratch marks on the corpse and the shroud. But it doesn't look like any animal dug this grave. It looks like a human did it. Perhaps a grave robber who failed to steal the body and left it here. More people gathered around. They buried Kalu again in the same grave. The next morning, the worshippers saw the exact same thing. Kalu's grave was open and his body was lying outside. Everyone came and tried to analyze what could be happening. but no one could figure out who could be doing such a thing. The body was intact, with no wounds, and the shroud was undisturbed. So who could be responsible? Nevertheless, the body was buried again. On the third morning, after the Fajr prayer, the worshippers witnessed the same event repeat itself. They saw the body lying outside the open grave. This time, Ruhul Amin came to the scene. He hadn't come the previous 2 days. On the third day, Ruhul Amin arrived and told everyone, "Since this keeps happening in this grave, let's bury the body somewhere else." But the villagers refused. They said, "Why should we bury him elsewhere? We will try to solve this problem. Why move the body?" The body was once again buried in the same grave. Strangely, on the fourth day, nothing happened. About 7 or 8 days later, a man from the same village named Samad, also known as Somed, passed away. When he was buried in that graveyard the next morning after Fajr prayers, the mosque worshippers saw that Samad's grave was dug up and his body was placed on top. They couldn't understand who was doing this or why. He was placed back in the grave and the grave was covered. The next day, the same thing happened again. Samad's grave was open and his body was outside. It was then decided that this couldn't continue. "We will post guards," they resolved. When the 2 influential brothers were informed, they said, "Of course, you must post guards, and we will cover all the expenses." It's worth noting here that the 2 brothers spent very little time in the village. They were mostly abroad for their business. So guards were appointed, 4 very brave men. On the second day of the watch, after the Fajr prayer, people found the guards at the graveyard fast asleep. They were sleeping so soundly that no one could wake them up. They also noticed something even more bizarre. Samad's grave was open and his body was lying outside. When the local people finally managed to wake the guards and ask them, "What kind of watch were you keeping for this to happen?" they replied, "Late at night, a strange, sweet fragrance filled our nostrils, and after that, we remember nothing. We fell asleep." And then this happened. The villagers were not satisfied with their explanation. On the third day, they appointed 4 different men to stand guard. But on the third day, the exact same thing occurred. The 4 new guards were found in a deep sleep, and Samad's body was lying outside the grave. On the third day, just like with Kalu, Ruhul Amin appeared. He said, "Don't bury this body here anymore. Bury it somewhere else." But the villagers didn't listen to him and buried the body there again. On the 4th day, nothing happened. Several months passed. No one else died in the village, so the villagers didn't feel the need to post any more guards. In the meantime, Ruhul Amin, who had been unmarried, got married. One night, his wife noticed that the bedroom door was locked from the inside, but Ruhul was not in the room. She turned up the wick of her hurricane lamp and searched the room, thinking perhaps he was sleeping on the floor due to the heat. But he was nowhere to be found, and the door was locked. So, where could Ruhul have gone? As soon as his wife opened the door and stepped onto the veranda, she saw Ruhul lying unconscious, his entire body caked in dust, sand, and mud. Seeing her husband in this state, she let out a loud scream. Her scream brought Ruhul back to consciousness. He woke up and told his wife to stop screaming. "Don't scream," he said. She asked him, "How did you get outside when the door was locked?" Ruhul replied, "Let me take a bath and I will tell you everything." After his bath, his wife was rubbing mustard oil on his body. While doing so, she suddenly noticed 3 thick, black marks on Ruhul's back. 2 of the marks looked old, while 1 seemed fresh. They looked exactly like the scars left by a hot iron rod. His wife asked him, "How did you get these 3 marks on your back?" Ruhul couldn't say anything about the marks, but he told his wife some strange things and made her promise not to tell anyone. She promised. Ruhul then confessed, The night Kalu's body was buried, a strange, sweet fragrance came to my nose, and someone told me, "Ruhul, enough, it's time to work." I could only feel that I was walking somewhere, but I had no control over my own body. I went to that graveyard. Someone said, "Ruhul, start working." I started digging the grave. Then someone told me to lift the body out of the grave and place it on top. After that, I remember nothing. The same thing happened the first, second, and third day with Samad's body. And tonight, the night his wife found him on the veranda, a woman's body had been buried in that graveyard. That night too, I smelled that strange fragrance, and how I got outside the locked door, I cannot say. His wife said, "We can't just keep this to ourselves. We have to tell someone to find a solution." Ruhul's wife explained the situation to her mother, Ruhul's mother-in-law. Ruhul's mother-in-law knew a very good hujur, Islamic scholar. The three of them, Ruhul, his wife, and his mother-in-law, went to see him. After listening to the story, the hujur fell silent for a moment and then said, "A very powerful family of jinn lives in that graveyard. They did not want a graveyard to be built there. They lived in that kadam tree. After the tree was cut down, they became furious. They are angry at Ruhul because he was the one who cut the tree and carried it on his own shoulders. That is why the jinn are using Ruhul to dig up those graves and carry the bodies out." However, he added, "These jinn are so powerful, my strength is nothing compared to theirs." He did, however, perform some incantations, blessed some oil, and tied an amulet, tabiz, on Ruhul's arm. He warned, "The day this amulet is no longer on your arm, they will make you work for them again." Dear listeners, a year and a half went by. A few more people were buried in that graveyard during that time, but there were no more problems. There were no more guards, and people had mostly forgotten about the previous incidents. One night, the principal of the local Raghunathpur Madrasa, Hafiz Abdul Hassan, locally known as Salim Hujur, was buried there. He was a very pious and respected man. That night, Ruhul himself attended Salim Hujur's funeral and helped bury his body before returning home. Late at night, Ruhul and his wife suddenly smelled that unearthly sweet fragrance. Ruhul said, "My call has come." His wife noticed that the amulet was no longer on his hand. It must have fallen off somewhere. She tried to stop him but couldn't, as she realized she had no control over herself. And Ruhul, as soon as he smelt the fragrance, lost all control of his body. That night, in a half-asleep, half-awake state, Ruhul went to the graveyard. Someone once again told him, "Ruhul, start working." Ruhul started digging the grave. After digging, just as he lifted the body, Ruhul felt an immense pressure on his hand. He looked down and saw that the corpse of Salim Hujur had grabbed his hand with one of its own. It was squeezing so tightly that Ruhul couldn't break free. After that, Ruhul remembered nothing more. The next morning, after the Fajr prayer, people saw a strange sight. The Hafiz's grave was open, but a head was visible above the ground with two hands spread out to the sides. People went closer and saw Ruhul, unconscious, standing inside the grave. The Hafiz body was perfectly fine inside the grave, not disturbed at all. The crowd revived Ruhul and became furious with him, accusing him of being a grave robber and worse. They shouted, "Ruhul, how could you do something so vile? You must be in league with some sorcerer or tantrik. You were probably trying to steal body parts to sell them, or you tried to steal the whole body and sell it, but failed." Some were so enraged, they were ready to beat him to death. Ruhul's wife also arrived at the scene. She and Ruhul told everyone the entire story, from the dreams to everything that had happened since. This time, the villagers believed them. They all decided that no new graves would be dug in that graveyard. The burial of Hafiz Salim would be the last. The two influential brothers, who were mostly abroad, were informed of the matter, and they also agreed that no more burials should take place there. From that day to this, no other body has been buried in that graveyard.
The two brothers bought more land next to the Union's central graveyard to expand it. Ruhul Amin passed away about a year ago, but his wife is still alive. One of the two influential brothers has also passed away, but their mother, who had the first dream warning against the graveyard, is still alive.
Dear listeners, that was the story. It is a very well-known local legend. If any of you go to the Shalomnagor Union in the Naran district, you will find that this story is true.